Hi everyone, Melissa Ayala here with Waterloo Greenway. Thank you so much for joining us today for our next virtual tour of Waterloo Park. We will be answering your questions at the end of the presentation, so please use the Q&A feature or the chat at any time. So with that, I'm excited to hear from our presenter today, John Rigdon. Our Director of Planning and Design will walk us through our tour, and then like I said, we'll answer questions at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, John.
Great, thanks Melissa. And thank you all for joining us today and taking the time to learn more about Waterloo Park. For those of y'all who may not be familiar, I'm just going to give a little brief context of where Waterloo Park fits within Waterloo Greenway and our organization. So we are a 501c3 in a partnership, a public-private partnership with the City of Austin. And we are responsible for bringing to life the vision of Waterloo Greenway. Waterloo Greenway is a 35-acre park and open space project on the eastern side of downtown. You can see it highlighted here in green, along about 1.5 miles of Waller Creek. And you can see Waller Creek in white sort of stretching through the middle of that green space and much further north in the area of our project. The vision for Waterloo Greenway is the result of an international design competition in 2012. And through that design competition, the City of Austin City Council selected our designers to lead this process, and that's Michael Van Valkenburg and Associates, who are leading the landscape architecture, and Thomas Pfeiffer and Partners, who are leading the architecture primarily of the Moody Amphitheater, and we'll get to a lot of imagery of that later. They have a great team of local subs working under them who are helping us achieve this vision as well, so it's a real team effort. This work is going to be executed in phases. So here you can see another image of the Greenway. We've flipped the screen, so north is now to your right. The work's going to be executed in phases, and we're talking about phase 1 today, which is the Moody Amphitheater in Waterloo Park, and you can see that highlighted kind of in the bolder orange outline. Many of y'all may have already been to our phase 0, which is Symphony Square, also in orange there. And about a year ago, we completed a renovation of that space and hosted a number of programs, including Creek Show, as well as many activations throughout the year in that new home, which is also our office. So in total, Waterloo Park, which we're going to talk about today, is 10.5 acres of the total 35 acres of parks and open space. Part of the reason we wanted to do this first is, one, because it's been closed for quite a while as the flood control tunnel was built. And you can see some of the infrastructure in the image here. And the other is a 10.5 acre park is a significant park on its own, even if the other 25 acres were not being built as part of the Greenway. So it's really a great phase 1 to hit the ground with and really show the community all the different things that Waterloo Greenway, once complete, will do for them. That sort of significant amount of activation and program you'll see as we walk through the different areas of the park and the tour. So with that, let's jump in and do our virtual tour through the park. So the vision, this is a rendering of the vision for the park at night. So really the thing you can see because it's dark is one of the sort of centerpieces of the park, which is the Moody Amphitheater, which is a concert and event space, a gathering space in the center of the park. And you can see that sort of lit up white roof, which is the canopy over the stage, and the crowd gathered in front of it. Again, the Moody Amphitheater was designed by Thomas Pfeiffer and Partners, and we'll walk through a lot of the really beautiful detail about architecture. You can also see the really central location of Waterloo Park in our community. We're right on the Red River Cultural District, which you can see Red River running along to the left. We're in the heart of downtown, when you can see the city skyline just behind us, as well as immediately adjacent to the Capitol. So a really great location along Waller Creek in downtown Austin. Here's where we were at the end of 2019, and this is already approximately a year into construction. And much of what we had done to this point that you see here was underground and moving earth around. Lots of utilities needed to be relocated. We needed to regrade the land in order to make it work for accessibility goals and program goals in the park. And we built a structured lawn which stretches out over the flood control pond, which you can see kind of on the left right here, if you can see my cursor. So all that we had completed, and at this point in 2019, we were just starting to build the amphitheater. Jump forward to this month. I took this photo just a couple days ago, and you can see, how much the park's changed. We've got a lot more plants in, and those are more and more going in every day. And we have an almost complete Moody Amphitheater building, including that steel canopy roof. So getting closer and closer to completing that vision. So let's go. We're gonna stop in various points throughout the park, just as we would if we were going on a physical tour, and hopefully we'll be able to again. If not, we'll just enjoy these spaces as an open park once it's complete in the spring. So our first stop, we're gonna cross the 14th Street Bridge off of Red River Street, which is one of the main entrances into the park. And we're gonna walk into the Moody Amphitheater, or the Great Lawn Space. So here's what you'll see when you cross the bridge and walk into the park. In front of us is the canopy in the Moody Amphitheater building, designed by Thomas Pfeiffer and Partners. This building is composed of, primarily concrete and steel. The canopy, which is the white structure with the columns you see over top of the stage, provides shade and rain protection for performers who are on the stage. And you can see the stage, right here above this truck. That's the stage where performers will gather, or performers will perform, and the community will gather when there's not a performance. And that roof you see over top is put together with 6-inch steel I-beams as well as custom steel trusses. And in between those trusses and I-beams, there's a series of skylights, skylight-like system, which provides rain protection while still allowing the light to come through. And I'll show some cool photos in a minute that show just how interesting that light sort of playing with the structure looks on the stage. There are over 5 miles of steel I-beams in this roof. So it's stacked steel, which provides that kind of trellis-like, cloud-like atmosphere, and provides us with the essential coverage as well as structural support for all the things that go into putting on a show up here on this stage. So jumping forward. Oh, and also you can see on the right here, just off screen, part of the building, the Moody Amphitheater building. One of the things that we heard through our community engagement and our close work with our partners in the Parks and Recreation Department is that, our community obviously loves concerts, events in public spaces and parks. But one of the downsides of that is often as you bring in the temporary stages and the restrooms and the concessions and the barriers and fences and everything else, there's a big impact on the park. So you might have a few days of event and then a few weeks of closure to restore a park from all those impacts from an event. So with that in mind, we really look to build robust, permanent infrastructure into the park, but that infrastructure sort of hides away into the landscape so we can quickly flip between event or run or gathering or rental or whatever the space may be used for. And then the next day, it can reopen as a fully functional park space with minimal impact. So on the right and left, behind these concrete walls, you can see the supporting infrastructure. So we have permanent concessions behind these windows here, permanent restrooms, all of this to support our max event capacity of around 5,000. We also have a ticket booth, which you can see over here to the right, an elevator up to an accessible plaza roof for park use or for use during a show. And then here is a straight-on shot looking at one of those kind of concession restroom alcoves. So behind the plastic scrim here protecting the back of house, you have concession windows, and then you have restrooms. So we have dozens of restrooms, again, able to support, without any temporary restrooms, up to 5,000 people using the space, as well as the number of concessions to support that similar use. Additionally, this allows us the flexibility. So we have all that permanently built. When there's a show, it's all open, fully functional, and can support that type of a crowd. When it's just a park the next day, we can close all of those spaces with a beautiful system of steel doors, and it just becomes a plaza where you can sit. Or we can choose to leave some of the restrooms or some of the concessions open, depending on the demand for park use. So it allows us to kind of dial up and dial down for general park use or event size. And all of those things tuck, in this case, into this concrete building with a plaza and green roof above it. And on the other side of the building, into the hillside, entirely covered by a green roof. So the experience of the building is much smaller than the actual square footage of the building. Looking into the back of house quickly, this is one of those concession areas. So on the right, you can see that curved concrete wall, and then we'll have carts that roll up to fill in that gap. And from those carts, food and beverage will be served. Then the carts will slide back in and steel doors will be closed, and all of this back of house will be secure. So to your left, you can see kind of where we're framing in, that's a walk-in cooler and prep space. Behind that, we have additional offices and supporting storage spaces for the concessions, of medical rooms, ticket booths, all of those types of things to support the event. Walking a little further into the park, we get to the lower lawn. This is a part of what we call the Great Lawn, which is this large lawn space in the middle of the park. During a show, the lower lawn may be seated with temporary seats for that lower area. During normal park use, all those temporary seats go away, and it's an open lawn where you can walk a dog, throw a frisbee, or just hang out and sit and enjoy the park. So here's a view from that lower lawn towards the stage. And where we're standing in this photo is a future sidewalk. This will provide an accessible sidewalk up towards the stage. All of this area will be lawn. So we'll have a lawn system here. The lawn itself is built on a very sort of strong structural system underneath a quick draining soil and grass above it. And that soil and grass drains, and then the water captured from that is filtered into a cistern right in front of the stage. That cistern then redirects that water to a series of rain gardens, which clean that water before it's released back into Waller Creek. So we really wanted to focus on sustainability as well as the effectiveness of maintaining and preserving this lawn for both of a good number of events and general park use and sort of a quick turnaround. And we've built in the supporting systems to do that. Here's a view from the stage, and a number of reasons I like this shot. I mean, you can start to see what I was talking about with that kind of dappled light, which works its way through the steel trellis above. If you look closely, you can see the glass skylights just above that series of steel I-beams. Also, kind of in the foreground here, you can see the stairs and the ramp to the left, where there's someone sitting in an orange construction hat. There's a ramp and a stair which leads up to the stage. During a show, there'll be kind of an insert put over that, and it'll just be flat stage. We'll take that out after the show, and the next day, this allows the stage to be publicly accessible. So, we'll have a ramp, stairs, people will be able to walk up on stage, and as you can see folks on our construction team doing, enjoy their lunch in chairs and seating that can be placed temporarily on stage in this beautiful shaded area. And here's another view of what that might look like. So it's pretty cool to see it being used now during the construction phase for one of the long-term uses. And just imagine walking over from your office and enjoying lunch under this beautiful architecture from a world-class firm, providing you that great shade and rain protection and looking out over this beautiful green park. And here's a view of what that canopy looks like, so you can get a sense of where all those 5 miles of steel are and how they create that shade. Also important here is you can begin to see kind of the infrastructure going in. So some of the things you won't see in the future are, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, which is going in. So you can see some of the cable being run up there and work being done on that. Ultimately, it'll all just look like a white, steel kind of cloud. But all of that goes in there so that we can support the event. Similarly, we'll be able to hang from a series of trusses up there, the curtains, the screens, the speakers, anything else which is required to put on large-scale events here. This roof can handle and support, allowing for sort of that quick turnaround, again, from large, complicated event back to general park use. Another cool moment you can see here is where the construction worker is standing up there. During normal park use, you'll be able to enter and walk from Trinity Street right to that wall in the back of the stage there and look down out over the park, over the back of the stage. So it'll be this cool moment where there'll be people on the stage that you can look down at, and they can look up at you, and then you can look over them out into the park beyond. Just kind of a shot showing you the edge of that steel canopy as it bends out and stretches out over the park. Another shot that shows you, this was a few months ago, but as we were constructing it, you can see how those layers of steel I-beams all stack on top of each other to provide that density to support the structure, but also the shade and to hide those skylights. So I think this is a really cool shot. You can see kind of the thickest part of the canopy roof there. Here's a look from straight on. So, this is probably like during a show, the mixed position where the sound guy will be, or maybe even just sort of the best seat in the house right in front of there, looking towards performers on that stage. So here's where we are, recently, and here's the vision. So you can see kind of how close we are. Ultimately, there'll be grass in there. There won't be weeds and plants like this. We'll have to mow it, and keep it real tidy. But you'll see the grass, and during general park use, it'll be just like this, folks hanging out on the stage. Also, you can see on the walls, on those concrete walls, we're going to be planting vines, which will creep up the walls and make them feel even more green and integrated into the park. Moving forward, we're going to take a quick peek into the back of house space. As I said, this is going to be a lively event space. We have a really critical partnership with C3 and Live Nation to put on contemporary music events in this space. And so we wanted to make sure that we're building in the robust infrastructure to support the types of shows that that partnership will bring to Waterloo Park. Additionally, we have a program of shows that we'll be producing in-house or with other partners, and those may be theater, dance, 5Ks and runs, other music type things, a range of different programs to serve the community. And we wanted to make sure we were kind of scaled up to support the most intensive of those in a way that really allowed this to stay a park space as much as possible, and as immediately as possible after any sort of private event. So the back of house, backstage area is really kind of the heart of what supports that. So you can see here, again, here's the stage. You can see all these narrow steel columns which drop down onto the stage and also through the roof and into the back of house area and support that roof. In the sort of background, you can see the entrance to the loading dock area, and this is where all the equipment will be rolled in. We have a 3-truck loading dock back there where you can load in and out your shows, and that allows us to turn things over really quickly at night. Again, you can see that ramp and stair area that I talked about getting up on stage, and the steel where all the trusses are that we'll rig the equipment to. The back of house, this is a few months ago, and I like this shot because it kind of shows you the shell, all the things that go into it. So to the left is where the stage is. This curved wall is the back of the stage. And then these columns are those kind of placed, individually, uniquely placed columns dropping through the roof, above the plaza, through the plaza, and then down through the roof. So above this is a plaza where folks will walk around and enter the park. And this is underground, almost like a basement layer. And the stage is to the left. So all those columns come through and creates this sort of concrete space. So then what we did is working with our partners, we create a program of offices, electrical rooms, IT rooms, support spaces, laundry, showers. We have 6 artist dressing rooms, a green room, all of those types of things built into this space. And that's what you see here is sort of the same shot with these new walls which are put in place in order to frame that out and provide privacy in those spaces. You can also see all of the IT and electrical and mechanical and plumbing overhead that's going in to support all that. So you can kind of see how we squeezed all this in underneath the hillside and sort of buried away from sort of the general park areas, but really to support those large events. Here's another shot. There's just a lot of our stuff going in, a lot of the equipment that's being run, all the cable runs. And this is just off the loading dock. So you can see, you'll unload all the equipment. Right now the construction team is using that loading dock as a loading dock to unload and build the back of house spaces. So long term, it'll have a similar use to what you see here and really support that quick turnaround from event to park and back. Moving further south, we're going to go through the Meredith Plaza, the Family Pavilion, and the Deal Booth Promenade, which are 3 prominent features kind of in the west, central, south area of the park where you enter off Trinity Street. So, the park, as we know it today, has really only existed since the 70s. Before that, it was a neighborhood, and over generations, and in that neighborhood, there are a lot of great historic trees. Fortunately, through its development, some of the best ones were preserved and survived through all the different iterations of the space. And probably the 2 best ones in the park are right here next to the amphitheater in what we call the Meredith Plaza. This is one of the main entrance points into the park, and it's really an oval-shaped deck around these 2 great historic live oaks. These heritage oaks provide great shade and are just sort of a beautiful entry point into the park. So what we have envisioned here is an area where people will be able to sit and enjoy lunch, pass through on their way into the playground, and just enjoy this great shade that it creates. So, what we were able to do here is bring in some really fantastic arborists, and we actually surveyed all of the roots and the trees themselves. And you can see the deck kind of has this unique shape of where the support structure is. A lot of that is driven by the scanning we did of the roots of these oaks. And then we individually placed the piles for the supporting sort of foundations of this deck in ways that would not negatively impact the roots. And then where those support structures were informed kind of this unique shape of where the deck steel is, which you can see here. This is kind of a cool shot in process showing how you build the wooden deck on top of that steel supporting system, which then goes on top of those kind of uniquely unevenly placed foundations. A little bit of a close-up shot. You can see in a little more detail here. We've got in the background our railings going in, and you can see the amphitheater walls beyond. Between this railing and the amphitheater wall is going to be a green roof. So that'll look like a nice lush green hill which slopes down to meet sort of below the railing. And then the hill will be well planted and you won't even really see that wall. So it'll just look like a nice green space. And below that, we actually have those dressing rooms and other spaces, which I just showed y'all, so buried into that hillside. In the foreground, again, you can see the deck being built on those uniquely placed foundations and the really kind of intense and complicated work that goes into this. And our great construction team at DPR Construction has been, skillfully navigating a lot of these complex conditions of this really unique site and building this unique park in it. And you can see some of the folks on their team out there now. Moving forward, we have the family pavilion, which is immediately adjacent to the Meredith Plaza. Originally, a couple of years ago, when we were developing the concept into a design for the park, we had a cafe building here. So, you can imagine cafes and parks you've seen in other places around the country with some indoor seating as well as outdoor seating and more of a single operator who was there permanently. We did a lot of community engagement and we've learned a lot from that community engagement. And one of the really big lessons learned for Waterloo Park was we did community engagement around the food program for the park. And kind of our goal was to bring community members to the park from all over. And how do we make it so folks feel like they can stay for a really long time so they can enjoy all the amenities of the park? And one of the things that really drives that is the ability to have affordable food in the park without having to pack up and drive somewhere else or go on a far walk or spend a lot of money. And when we engage the community about this cafe concept, there's a lot of concern about the price point as well as the variety of offerings that would come from that setup. So taking in that really sort of overwhelming feedback on that approach, we reconsidered and we shifted course. And working with Michael Hsu, Office of Architecture, who is one of our architects, and we designed this pavilion here. So the design they put together shifted from a cafe to a pavilion and 2 food trucks. So this pavilion you see here is a restroom, and you can see 3 restrooms over here that are publicly accessible and open during all park hours, as well as storage spaces to support programs and a trash room to hide away the trash and cleaning products and other things needed for those food trucks. One of the kind of revelations of that process was if we make this food trucks and we have it, so we have kind of longer term but temporary food trucks, we have the ability to lower kind of the barrier of entry for the food operators in town. We can open up the opportunity to focus, highlight different restaurants and trucks in this space over the years, and it'll be much more accessible to all. Also, it'll help lower the price point of the food and provide more options. So we were really excited about that shift and think it feels a lot more appropriate with kind of all the other spaces we have in Austin, which have this really great outdoor food culture. And then, the Meredith Plaza, which we just saw, will be the seating area for folks to enjoy, kind of shaded use of those trees. Moving in a little closer, and one of the cool features of this, unfortunately, it's covered up by this plywood here to prevent it from being damaged. Is we also heard from other parks and the community we engaged with that not only when you're at the park with kids, you need a lot of bathroom trips, but often you need hand washing trips which don't require bathroom use. And so you can spend a lot of time standing in line waiting on a bathroom when all you really need to do is wash some mud or a popsicle or something like that off of the kids' hands. So what we did is, Michael Shu's office sort of skillfully changed the program to move the sink into the middle of this vestibule and create this great kind of pedestal sink in the middle, really sculptural sink with numerous hand washing areas in the middle, and then the bathrooms themselves can be closed off for their use without shutting people off from the sinks. So this will not only look really cool and beautiful, but it will also allow for much more convenient use for the people who will use the restroom area as they just wash their hands. To the right, you can see an entrance into the storage area that will provide program storage. So think yoga mats and signs and equipment for field activities and classes and things like that in the park. So this is kind of the vision that we're working towards, and you can see the beautiful building in the background here, as well as 2 food trucks positioned around it. And then right now we're standing where this rendering was sort of taken from, on the Meredith Plaza looking out. So this would be where you sit. And again, this building takes cues from the Thomas Pfeiffer designed Moody Amphitheater with those concrete walls and it's sort of it being buried into the landscape, as you can see here. Moving forward, the Deal Booth Promenade is sort of just up the hill. So, we had another interesting problem with the site or design challenge. The grade changes from one corner of the site, the southwest corner of the site, to the southeast corner. The elevation, the grade changes about 50 feet. A program-wide goal for us that started with the design competition is universal accessibility. And wherever possible, we want these pathways to be the same for everyone, regardless of ability. So we want to avoid switchback ramps and elevators and lifts wherever we can, and just make it a single experience of mobility for everyone. So this offered the great opportunity of how do you move 50 feet with an ADA accessible pathway through 50 feet of elevation through the park. And so the design team came up with this great sort of snaking elevated walkway or promenade, which moves through the park. And you can see it here, this narrow concrete profile. Not only does it make it ADA accessible, but it also creates these great views out into the park and instances where the pathways go underneath and above. So you'll have landscape and then pathways passing above and below each other, which creates these really beautiful moments and interactions. So up from sort of one of the highest points in the site, you can see that pathway kind of snaking through and around the Lehman Plaza, which we'll talk about later, and down into the Family Pavilion in Meredith Plaza. And the playscapes will be right here if you can see my cursor. So here you can see our railings going in, which has been happening this week, as well as some plantings. So you can kind of see how the pathways above have pathways that pass underneath, and then it works its way through this great tree canopy. Here's a shot from below. Again, you can see those railings going in and the experience of walking beneath folks who are walking above with all those plantings in between. Also, we were able to create this really narrow curved concrete profile. So you don't have this thick, dense structure blocking your views of the beautiful landscape. And our landscape architecture firm, Michael Van Valkenburg and Associates, has done a wonderful job with that choreography of making sure you have these great views where the landscape really dominates, but these beautiful, elegant structures navigate your way through. And you can see that unique curved concrete shape that their design was able to achieve. Also, these darkly colored dark gray columns are placed in positions so they kind of disappear. They're not uniform and evenly placed so that they dominate your views. They're placed to kind of hide into the landscape. So you almost see this floating concrete ribbon with landscape all around it. And here's a view from underneath. There's cleanup that needs to be done. It's going to, not look exactly how it looks now, but you can kind of get a sense of that narrow profile and how walking underneath it will be such a cool experience. I like this shot. I think this just highlights the complexity of this type of work and the skill of the contractors who worked on it. This is the forming and the rebar and post-tensioning for that narrow concrete on the Deal Booth Promenade. So you can see not only was it post-tensioned, but it was curved, and then the rebar cages were floating so that they wouldn't appear at the bottom. So the amount of work that went into forming this and figuring out how to do it is also immense. So, our contractors did a tremendous job of taking those drawings and turning them into something buildable, and you can see a process shot here. I'm moving a little to the east. We're going to jump into the Kitty King Powell lawn. This is one of the primary play areas in the park. And, you know, working with our partners at the Parks Department, as well as our designers from MVVA, we really settled on this nature-based play approach. We had great research and support from both PARD and MVVA to sort of lead us to this point. But, you know, the depth of play, duration of play, and cognitive benefits of nature-based play versus a more traditional play approach, there's a huge difference. And also it has the added benefit, if you don't want to go to a playground, you don't feel like you're in one just by looking at it. It's not bright plastic and, you know, all the other stuff that you might see in sort of a school playground. It really feels like this is only a playground. No one else should be here. So it has that added benefit of looking very natural. And you can see in this image, we have wood climbers. We have what we call mega grass in the foreground, which is kind of a toddler, younger play element, which feels like gigantic grass. We have a stone slide and some rocks to kind of climb up. And what these really formal play elements do is they're fun, obviously, but they also serve as kind of an invitation for children. So this is an area to play. And then beyond that, we have other areas which are less formal in their play, like stone scrambles and pathways through gardens. And if we indicate with these formal structures that, no, you can play here, then it extends the play to those other less formal play areas and deepens the play and engagement that children have with the natural areas of the park. So I'll show you some of those areas, but it's kind of a way of really inviting children into play and keeping them there for longer. So here's what that looks like, you know, today, a few days ago. In the foreground will be that mega grass, in the background will be the climber. And then you can again see that beautiful deal booth promenade kind of snaking its way through the canopy of these trees. Also, to the left, you can see the limestone blocks. And those limestone blocks are shaded, as you can tell here, and they provide seating for parents to keep a close eye on children as they play, as well as just general seating to get out of the sun and enjoy the beautiful shade from these trees. Flipping around, here's another view looking to the east. These foundations you see here are for that log climber, so it's a very robust climbing structure. And then you can see that seating again in the shade of these beautiful heritage trees. You know, one thing to note here is we had great trees already on site, and then we also had great partnerships with the City of Austin, the State of Texas, University of Texas, and adjacent developers like Graystar Development that allowed us to relocate 4 heritage oaks into the park to further enhance that shade canopy. So we have the existing trees, relocated trees, and then we planted smaller trees, which would be future shade trees, to really make sure we have great shade in the park over the life of the park, because we all know how important that is to, you know, enjoying any outdoor experience in Austin for a significant part of the year. Our stone slide. So, you know, we looked at slide options, and obviously metal's not an option for anyone who's from any hot part of the country or the world. And plastic just, again, has that feel, doesn't integrate well with the natural experience we're trying to create. So this slide is made from granite and was custom built to fit the park by a play fabricator in Germany. So it's really cool. They fabricated it, they put it together, they sent us some videos of them sliding down it and making sure it worked. And then it was shipped over here and then reassembled on site. And so this is its final home here in Waterloo Park. And around that will be plantings as well as sort of stone climbing areas where you can climb up and kind of scurry up to go down the slide again. And here's a view from up on Trinity Street looking down over the play area. So you can see again the seating where this forklift is where that climber will be, and then the slide is sort of just beyond this tree. And it's immediately adjacent to the family pavilion and the Meredith Plaza. So you can imagine sort of going over, grabbing some food, and then coming over and sitting on these stone steps, watching your kids play, running back, washing hands. It's all in that close proximity. And again, it's so we can have longer trips with more activities in a single space. Moving to the south, we're going to enter into what we call the Hill Country Garden. We had the great benefit, you know, of it being an existing park, and again of, you know, preservation of existing trees, of the southwest corner of the park kind of being this rocky hill with great existing heritage live oak trees. And we, you know, the design team worked with those existing trees to create a great hill country shade garden and pathways and seating areas which navigated that garden. So this is kind of looking towards the southeast, out over that. You can see the Deal Booth Promenade here on your left. That'll be kind of the main pathway snaking through the trees. And then in front of you, you can see not only the larger existing trees, but a lot of the new trees which are going in place, which will provide future shade. What you don't see yet is all of the lower ground cover plants, which will turn this into a garden. So, you know, I mentioned earlier that one of the goals with the nature-based play is to not just have, you know, nice natural materials, but also to engage children with nature in new ways that create, you know, better cognitive development and longer periods of play. So one of the ways to do that is to pull kids from the play into garden areas where they can explore and get their hands dirty a little bit. So one of the ways that MVVA has done that here with the design is through what you see, what we call the stone scramble. So you see on the ground these pieces of stone which are turned kind of into a pathway, almost like sort of a patio. MVVA in their visits to local quarries discovered this stone waste product. They're kind of the bad cuts from what you might see as residential facade cladding on the front of a home. And there's just piles and piles of them at a lot of these quarries, and they're not being used. So we were able to take that salvage product, you know, at a lower cost, give it a new life, you know, a sustainability benefit here, creating these informal stone scrambles which work their way through the garden. So you can't see it now because we don't have a lot of the ground cover plants in, but all of these areas of soils you see here will be densely planted with hill country native species. And then these pathways will kind of hide in between them and be great areas for kids to kind of dart in and out of and enjoy the garden. Similarly, adults obviously as well can navigate through the gardens and get up close and personal with a lot of these great plantings in the space. Looking towards the south, you can kind of see that huge grade change I mentioned as things drop off and go downhill. You know, we've got plantings going in, we've got lighting, that's what these bollards are, kind of a nice low level of lighting that doesn't disrupt habitat, but keeps things safe. And then we have an additional series of pathways which navigate in and around the trees and provide seating and a slower kind of pace of walking through the gardens. Here's a cool shot that shows those lower pathways going underneath the Deal Booth Promenade. So again, that kind of really cool over-under experience and some additional shade. And then you can see the trees being planted in. You also can see here a rain garden. So these rain gardens will be beautiful, but they'll also be functional. The beauty will come from the plantings we're doing and our planting experts on the team, including the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. But the functional element is earlier I told you all about the cistern and where the water goes from the lawn as we water it. Well, that water eventually makes its way across the park and into this and 2 other rain gardens that filter it on its way back into Waller Creek. So we're putting clean water back into the creek. And you can see, you know, the very bottom of the hill next to the creek, how these existing beautiful live oaks kind of work their way up this rocky hill, and then how we've built these stone elevated walkways and stairs and plantings in and around those trees. Also the benches. So we have these, you know, pathways which sort of bend and elbow their way around these trees, and they're made with a porous pavement, which allows water, rainwater, to soak through them, creating, you know, less impervious cover, but also providing an ADA accessible surface. At all kind of the elbows into the trees, we've created these custom concrete cast-in-place benches. These benches will have an additional wood topper for comfort. So these are areas where you can sit and enjoy the garden, maybe do a little work, or just have a peaceful moment. And there's a number of these at each elbow of this bending walkway. So here's another one. This will all be densely planted, and you can just see the shade as it sort of creates that dappled light on the seating areas. So this is what it looks like a few weeks ago. There's more plants in now, but ultimately the vision is something like this. You can again see those trees and the shade, but now we've got all these ground cover plantings and creating this garden space. So moving forward to our final stop on the tour is the Lehman Plaza. You know, one of the aspects of this project that's, you know, maybe different than other parks in the area, and there's some parks that are like this, but really we wanted this to be an active place of programs. So, you know, we want people obviously to be able to enjoy the passive use that most of our community parks provide, you know, a peaceful nature walk. walking your dog, going out and throwing a Frisbee, those types of activities. But we also wanted active uses that really engage our community with educational opportunities, health opportunities, arts and culture opportunities. And we have the Moody Amphitheater, which will be that on a really big scale. But not everything fits into that space. So we have the Lehman Plaza here, which is another program space. This large flat area, it's approximately 40 by 40. It's got power and water and all the hookups required to put on smaller events, whether that's like kids performances, puppet shows, dance, smaller music performances, or rentals, gatherings, those types of things. It's got the flat space that also has kind of this stadium seating created by the stone here. So this might be a great opportunity for both formal and informal programs to happen in the park in this flat area. Also, you can see, one of the cool elements, and here's a close-up shot of that. One of the cool elements too is the Deal Booth Promenade works its way completely around this plaza. So you can just imagine, maybe there's some music happening below or some other activity. There's people sitting, enjoying it, and there's people leaning over the rail of the plaza above and watching from above. And it really creates this highly active space for our community to all kind of experience, arts, culture, and each other in the park. And you can see here again, the Deal Booth Promenade works its way around, and it'll be nestled into this really densely planted landscape, providing some amount of privacy and shade, but also the opportunity to kind of see what's going on behind there. You kind of want to explore and work your way through the pathways to really see it. So now I'm going to show you all some aerial views of the park, just to give you the big picture. We walk through the park, and now we're going to kind of go on the helicopter tour. So imagine, this is above the Breckenridge Garage, kind of near the former hospital site, above Red River Street. And you can see down, you can see the canopy, the white canopy of the roof. You can see that lawn stretching out over the creek, and the soils going into the lower lawn area here. You can also see the restrooms and concessions and how they bury into the hillside. So all above these walls, this is all going to be green, densely planted. It'll look like a hill, a rolling hill. Over here, you can see that other area where we entered into the concessions. So there's concessions on both sides and bathrooms on both sides. Moving to the southeast corner, I mentioned the great tree transplant program we've been able to work on with all of our partners. One of those trees is right here in the bottom corner, surrounded by the orange fence. This tree and this area in general, this will be a wetland that's yet to be reconstructed. And it'll also be the trailhead to the trail, which will go all the way down to the lake. So this tree that we were able to work on in partnership to transplant will provide great shade for folks who are ending their runs or just entering into the trail. They'll be seating around it in a great shaded area here. And another example of this park, this whole program is really about partnership. And I think all of the partnerships I've talked about to get this done really highlight that. And there's many more coming in the future as we look to program this space. And we certainly want to hear from y'all about people we should get in touch with who may be interested in working with us on various elements or programs of this space or future parks. So winding our way further clockwise around the park, this is above 12th Street looking south. So you can start to see the plantings are coming in and it's beginning to look like a park again. Trees have been transplanted. We have these great existing heritage oaks, and covered in sort of the black tarp, you can see that permeable pavement making its way through the shade trees and providing seating areas. You can see the Deal Booth Promenade as it works its way over top of that and through the park, and those stone scramble areas I highlighted that are kind of those meandering pathways. And then all these plantings are starting to go in. I also like this shot because you can see the soils going in. So that really rich, dark brown soil, that's a significant depth of imported soils that we brought on site to amend and restore the ability to plant all these plants and have them survive. So that's working its way south to north, and the plantings are working their way in on top of that. You can also see the Lehman Plaza here, or Lehman Plaza, sorry. And in the foreground here, this next image, this is over Trandy Street looking east. You see the Meredith Plaza, that deck. You get a really good shot of that unique pattern of foundations and supporting structure. You see the family pavilion, so the restrooms will be in here, and then the two food trucks will go here and here. You can again see the Lehman Plaza with the Deal Booth Promenade kind of hugging it, and providing those views into it. Then the play area here in the middle. You also see the back of the great lawn. So during a show, these will be kind of the lawn seats. You know, you'll bring your picnic blanket and sit out up here and have a great view down to the stage. During normal park use, you'll just bring your picnic blanket and hang out in a great park. This is a view over top of the canopy. You can see where you enter off Trinity Street, and this will be a plaza that you can walk on and enjoy, and then a stair and an elevator down to the park. The loading docks I mentioned earlier, and in this area will also be a green roof, so you can see those soils going in right here, and then the plantings will start happening soon. And you can kind of see how the lawn stretches out from the stage to provide seating, temporary seating, and also lawn seating. Moving all the way around to the north, one of the elements we didn't really touch on, but you know, we're building now and we'll have more great photos of it as the plants start to go in. As part of this project was also completely rebuilding Waller Creek between 14th and 15th Street. So in the foreground here, you can see that rebuilding underway with all this new stonework going in to support this bank. This really helps control erosion, provide habitat, and really create a beautiful creek in this section that you'll see from the 14th Street Bridge, Red River Street, and from the park. And that's being built right now as well. And we'll have some more great shots of that once the plants start going in. And so with that, you know, that's the general tour, and you know, Melissa and I are happy to take any questions you'll have.
Thanks, John. That was great. It's always really exciting for us to be able to show off the park and keep folks engaged, because you know it's kind of hard to see in. There's a big fence around it, but there is a lot happening. So we have gotten many questions. So thank you all for being engaged and sharing your input. The first question that we have is about opening date and when folks can expect to check it out themselves. And of course, we've had to adjust and assess during COVID to make sure that we're working on the site as safely as we can. So we have a lot of safety protocols and we're following all the city guidelines. And with that, we're anticipating to open in spring of next year. We're working as quickly as we can to make that possible. We also have a question about bike amenities and if we would have storage on site, and just describing the trails and what's accessible for bikes.
Sure. So we will have you know, ample bike racks on site. We don't have sort of a covered bike storage type system on site, but we do have bike parking. In terms of the trails, we have wider trails, like the Dilbooth Promenade is up to 14 feet wide, and most areas is 12, so that we can accommodate, you know, bikes, pedestrians, strollers, all of those types of things. But the pathways in the park, even when they are wide, the intention is not for those to be kind of commuter corridors for bicycles. We have a really strong existing commuter corridor on Red River, which is getting even further enhancements as Red River's relocated. That would be where you would go if you were in a hurry. But if you're kind of moving slowly through the park, or you know, you're with a kid who's learned to ride a bike and wants to ride through there, that would be appropriate. But we probably wouldn't have the 20-mile-per-hour cyclist going through the park on these pathways. But again, they are accessible due to the grade and the surface material. So you know, we'll be figuring out as we go sort of what the appropriate rules and regulations are on that. We're not banning bikes or anything like that, but we may have areas where you have to step off your bike or where slower bike speeds are required.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And we will have, you know, the extensive trail network within the park that John mentioned, with our main paths and then those smaller dome paths. And then, like we talked about earlier, that'll be the connecting point for our main trail that will connect our series of parks and connect with the hike and bike trail at the lake. So thank you for that question. We also have a question about the amphitheater and how we'll manage the roof and the infrastructure, and how we'll make sure to keep it clean, and just monitoring that, and also how we'll keep birds off of the roof.
Yeah, great questions. You know, it's putting in a white steel roof that you're going to attach a bunch of stuff to, and you know, in our climate is, you know, obviously a choice that requires maintenance. And you know, we will be doing power washing and repainting as required, and cleaning of that structure. and our teams developed approaches for doing that that are sensible and don't require outrageous measures to make them happen. And we've chosen really tough multi-layered paint to start. So kind of like a heavy-duty marine paint is in place on the steel now, which is very resistant to any sort of discoloration or staining. So that is a built-in barrier to that, and then we'll have to continue maintenance. The way the roof is designed is that the underside of it has a grid which can support equipment being sort of trussed up and lifted up to attach to that. So there'll be kind of a separate truss system, which is affixed to that for each show, and then is raised up and put in place, which will hold all of the equipment for those shows. And each show will be unique in that regard, but that's why we have, for the contemporary shows, we have the expertise of our partners at C3 to really help with that. And we'll have our own Waterloo Greenway staff with expertise on that as well, who will be kind of the GM and building manager to help any range of events and ensure that there's continuity and care for that structure. Regarding birds, we've looked at many different approaches. So we've gone through a wide range of research and information about birds. And I think, where we are now is we're going to try some things out. One of the cool ideas that came up that we might mix in a little bit, but has its limitations, is falconry. So we might do a little bit of that, some birds of prey on site. Maybe, we've done birds of prey shows, and those are always very popular, but they can also be used to help manage bird populations. Also, laser-based approaches like are done downtown. We're going to extend those into the park and have regular use of kind of those green lasers to help discourage bird activity. So I think it'll be we'll use the known approaches and figure out the right mix for this particular system that works.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's helpful. And we'll continue updating folks as we test some of these things out. And like John said, our park operations team will be on staff with us, and they'll be on the ground on a daily basis. And we're also working with the downtown ambassadors also. And so related to that, we have a question about the amphitheater and our partnership with C3. So if you could quickly talk through the ticketed component of that partnership, and then also with tickets, someone asked what we do with that income and what that's supporting.
Sure, and everything we're doing really is in support of creating the best possible park for our community, and this partnership with C3 Live Nation and the contemporary music shows that will go in the space are no different. So one of the goals obviously is we want to bring great music to continue to bring great music to this area of downtown and be a part of all the great things happening in the Red River Cultural District. And that obviously this program of contemporary shows will allow us to do that and bring in kind of that bigger venue to this area that's kind of a missing piece in terms of the size, around 5,000 capacity. So there'll be that great cultural offering that'll add highlighting local artists, bringing in touring artists, and providing that benefit to the community. And C3 and Live Nation will help us book it, put on the shows, and from that, there's obviously a revenue component. And the revenues that come out of that and come back to Waterloo Greenway will be immediately invested in supporting the operations of the park. So it really allows us to maintain, operate and program at a really high level. So, kind of thinking about our sort of three-legged stool of how we maintain a world-class park. Obviously, there's fundraising that we're going to do every year and have always done. If you're only relying on that, it's going to be really tough. So we look for earned revenue opportunities, and this is one of them to help, support that. So we'll have the revenue from these shows. We'll also have rentals of smaller areas. We already do that with Symphony Square when appropriate. And one of the great things about that is Waterloo Greenway is there to help manage that and ensure that sort of the number one priority is serving the community. So that's, a great thing as well, as kind of being the GM and managers of the park and the amphitheater. And those revenues help support. And the third leg of the stool is our partnerships, particularly our partnership with the Downtown Austin Alliance to extend those ambassador services into the park and really help make this great, safe, and clean space. So, those revenues are really critical to supporting that. I'll also say that, in addition to the kind of ticketed contemporary shows, we'll also have free contemporary shows, ticketed community-based programs of other types like dance and theater, and then free programs of those types as well. So it'll be a balance of free and different price points, a balance of different art forms and gatherings. And the idea is this is really kind of a central hub for larger community gatherings, and with the ability to quickly go back to a park after that. So we didn't want to have to choose. We wanted to make sure that the community could have it both ways with park use and frequent programs.
Yeah, thank you for that information. And one of the related questions that we got was, about the park itself. And just as a reminder, this will be a City of Austin park, and we work very closely with the Parks and Recreation Department and Watershed Protection Department. They're very close partners with us. They're involved with the project on a daily basis. So this is definitely a collaboration. And we had another question about who is producing the program. So like John just mentioned, we have our partnership with C3, but then we'll also have our Waterloo Greenway produced programs. And our next question is about the creek and the restoration, and if the Waterloo Greenway project will be like the Riverwalk.
So yes and no. I think in some ways it will, particularly some of the newer restored sections of the Riverwalk project that have sort of more of a restoration and ecological focus. You can see, on our website we have renderings and information about future phases of the creek restoration, which really show a lush, green, heavily planted creek. And that will be kind of the focus. So we're in the Riverwalk, you can imagine a lot of commercial activity right adjacent to the water, patios, seating areas, sidewalks. Generally speaking, the experience of being on Waller Creek will be a restored creek, and at the top of the bank, rather than next to the water, you'll have pathways, seating areas, park spaces, and some selective commercial locations on some of the new developments in downtown areas. And then, kind of the part of the experience we want to help create is, we've got so much dense growth and commercial activity downtown. This is kind of an escape. So, you can enjoy great food and beverage right there, and then you walk into the Greenway and you're immersed in this natural experience on a beautiful restored creek. So if you look on our website at the southern section of our project, you can see kind of bridges which sort of crisscross through the canopy, and you can look down into a restored creek. So it's yes and no in terms of if it'll be like the Riverwalk. Similar level of activation and activity, a real focus on safety, and creating great places for our community. But the balance is more on bringing people to nature in the city than it is on bringing commercial activity to a natural area.
Yeah, thanks for that. And we have one of our final questions is about the Shoal Creek Trail, and just to orient folks. So Waller Creek is located on the eastern side of downtown, and Shoal Creek is on the western side of downtown. And both will be connected by the hike and bike trail. So, this is an extension of our trail network overall for the city. So as we're bringing on new amenities, folks will have options for using all of the trails to get around on their bike or walking or running, just a lot more options. But Shoal Creek is on the other side of downtown, just to clarify that. And our
and I'll just to add to that, just to add to that, Shoal Creek is, undergoing similar goals and changes to the creek, adding to their great system of trails that already exist. And, ultimately the big vision for our community is stitching together this system of trails, not just at the lake, but to the north as well. And, Shoal Creek and our other trails partners have done a great job advancing that mission. And we're certainly part of trying to create this great accessible trail network around our entire community and bringing everyone access to downtown, whether it's Shoal Creek or Waterloo Greenway or a public square or the Trail Foundation's work at the lake. So really long term, we hope those things all connect and we create this great system.
I want to thank John for that great presentation and those great images. It's a lot of fun to celebrate the future of Waterloo Greenway and Waterloo Park. I also want to thank some of our supporters who are making this series possible. So thank you to our 2020 program sponsors, including BBVA, the PAL Foundation, Susan Bond Foundation, Waterloo Sparkling Water, and the Word Company. And like I mentioned, we'll continue doing this series once a month. So please visit our website to sign up for that, or if you'd like to share it with anyone else. And we want to thank you all for joining us.